and Nathaniel here. We are back with another episode for you guys. Before we get started, I do want to make a note. We do have a Twitter, and we try and post on there fairly often. I know Nathaniel and I both check it all the time. Wow. A somewhat healthy
daily
amount. Not too much.
Somewhat healthy amount.
If you want to find us on there, you can search Official Cap City. I think all three of us are following it, so you can look on our following list. But at Official Cap City is our Twitter handle. So look us up on there. But without further ado, we're going to jump into things. We're going to be talking about some Heisman hopefuls today. Who do you guys have, before we get into the statistics and all the in-depth stuff, who do you guys have in the lead? No explanation, just throw a name out there, and then we'll talk about why.
Still really high on Michael Penix. Yeah.
I echo that. Not much debate to go on that question. Right now, the betting favorite is J.J. McCarthy, which is kind of odd because if you compare all of probably the top six in terms of voting odds right now, he's not the best or even really close, but he's the only one that hasn't had a quote unquote bad game yet. Or had a loss. Bo Nix hasn't had a bad game yet, but they lost to Washington. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Michael Penix kind of struggled last week, only scoring 15 points and barely squeaking out a win over a non-ranked opponent. So That's kind of where it's gone. Jaden Daniels has looked really good, but LSU has 2 losses. So that's kind of where the issue is, and JJ's kind of won by default. It feels like he's playing super well and he's super efficient. So I don't want to just act like a Michigan hater here, but he just doesn't seem like we are, but he just doesn't seem like his stats are there to actually win it. Michael Penix Jr. is elevated Washington as a program. I mean, Washington's been a successful program for the last 10 years, but he definitely feels like he's elevated them, and they definitely still feel like a contender. So that Michael Penix Jr. is probably won for me because of those reasons.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we were talking about this a little bit before we actually started recording. I think most people are aware at this point that the Heisman Award is mostly a quarterback award. Mm-hmm. Not that that's what it's intended to be. 9 times out of 10. And I don't agree with that personally. But, the voters, again, like you just said, 9 times out of 10, they're going to pick a quarterback. A quarterback is the most important position on the field. It's the one that's the flashiest. It's the one with all the stats and the breakdowns, and the NIL deals are going to quarterbacks first, and they're the face of the team, and all the ads point to that. That's just the way of the game and the way that it goes. Again, I don't agree with it. I think there's defensive ends that should have won in the last couple of years. I think there's wide receivers and running backs that have looked very good recently. But again, the leaders are almost always going to be quarterbacks. Now, the exception to that this year, I guess there are 2 technically, with Brock Bowers being one as well. But with the injury he has, I don't think he's going to play the next at least 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So he'll probably drop off that board. The other exception to that is Marvin Harrison Jr. What do we think about his chances?
So I guess the way that I've been viewing this is he's got a couple things going for him. How many wide receivers in the country right now are a household name? That's one thing that you kind of have to think about. I don't think that anybody can hear the play or the phrase "best player in America" and not have to think Marvin Jr. is not in that conversation. While a lot of these quarterbacks are putting up great numbers, who do we think is the best draft prospect that we've got coming out of college? I mean, the 2 people that are being talked about are Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. So he's got that going for him. Statistically, he's had a lot of really good games, but he had 2 games that were subpar. The Indiana game, I think he only had 2 targets and 18 yards, or three targets or something like that. And then I believe there was another the Notre Dame game. He didn't have a whole lot of yards. Emeka had most of the production in that game, and so those 2 games are kind of weighing his conversation down. I think he'd be in the conversation a little bit more than he is now if he had produced in those 2 games. Outside of that, I mean, if he's going to make a legitimate run, I chatted with Nate about this earlier. I would think he's going to have to average 125 plus a game with 15 targets, which is doable. 15 targets and at least a touchdown a game at this point to put him somewhere in the 12 to 15 touchdowns, 13 to 1,500 yards. And then Ohio State, going back to the general Heisman conversation, Ohio State's in the spotlight. The Heisman Award typically goes to someone who, is in the spotlight. They've got the stages. They've got the statistics. Like you said, it's very much a statistical award. The reason we see QBs winning it is because there's so many statistics that we can look at and evaluate with a QB, which you can't look at as much with a wide receiver or a defensive end or a running back. And I guess the fourth factor I would mention would be like he's got to have some of these like other dominoes fall. Like these other guys are going to either have to get losses or not make it to title games in their conferences. Do we think he's talented as the most talented player in the country, or one of the best college football players? I think that's a unanimous yes from anybody who's watched him play. Probably the best wide receiver draft prospect we've seen in the last 5 years, or one of the top three. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase being the other two. But I think it's possible. We've seen the path paved by Devonta Smith, but we did talk about this. I believe he's about 200 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns behind, which, if he had those 2 games back against Indiana and Notre Dame, and we all know this as Ohio State fans, it's not just him. He doesn't have CJ throwing to him anymore. Kyle's not CJ. So it might be a little bit different with a better quarterback. But that's kind of where I'm at with Marvin specifically.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Good, no debating today, I guess. I think Marv is without question the best receiver in the country, and I think a lot of us think he's probably the best player in the country. But I agree with a lot of what you said. I think just the precedent for a receiver winning the Heisman is just not there most years. It happens once in a blue moon, an odd year here or there. I think Marvin's at a disadvantage with the fact that it happened recently. Like Devonta Smith winning it was not that long ago, so that's still kind of something in some people's minds that I just don't think it's going to happen regularly, regardless if that's right or wrong. It's just kind of what the history of college football tells us. And then even with that, even if he didn't have that going against him, his stats just plainly aren't as good as Devonta Smith were at this point in the year that Smith won the Heisman, and that's not Marv's fault. Fault at all. We know how good he is. I'm an Eagles fan, so I do love Devonta Smith, but I would Marv is a better pro prospect than and Devonta Smith went 10th in the draft. So Marv is just kind of built different. But the slow start didn't help. Who he has throwing the ball doesn't help. I'm still not completely sold on Kyle McCord. The poor guy is 7-8-0, but
he's winning.
He's winning games, but just I think Marv is a little bit behind the 8 ball statistically to be able to kind of justify winning the Heisman. I think him getting invited to New York is very much on the table.
Absolutely.
I don't think I wouldn't be shocked at all by him getting an invite.
They change the amount of players that are invited year by year. I think I don't think it's a set number. I feel like it's kind of fluid.
I think it's the guys that are the fake quote favorites. Anything more than I don't know, probably a 5% vote.
So I feel like there's been years where there's 4 and there's years where there's 3.
I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that's probably the case.
I think you're right. I think I've seen those 5.
I think maybe 5 1 year.
So I would not be shocked if he's invited to New York for the Heisman. I think he'll be more than deserving. I definitely think there will be a case for him with the term, like you said, best player in America. That's Maserati Marv all day.
And Gus Johnson's good at coming up with that.
the thing with that is if anyone else said it, I don't know if I'd like it. But just the way he said it, because it was Gus, I was that's so cool. That's a cool nickname now that he said it. But yeah, Marv's great, but I would be shocked if he won it. Wouldn't be shocked if he got invited to New York.
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
I give him a 3 to 5% chance rate at this point. Now, obviously, he's got the stages, right? He's got the game at November 25th, and then Big Ten championship game ensuing, which we know it'll probably be either Iowa or Wisconsin at this point. We're probably going to beat Wisconsin this weekend, and then Iowa would have to lose a couple games not to not make it. But and then at that point, that would be the vote. But he's got the stages, and like I said, if he puts up 100, even 150 yards, somewhere in that range a game for the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks, there's a chance. But
well, that's what made Devontae Smith's year like extra silly, because I'm trying to remember. Najee Harris was still there. I think Najee had like 1,400 yards rushing.
The big thing with the year that I was getting ready, this was the thing I was going to say. The big thing with the year that Devontae Smith won, if you look at the team and the way they played, and you watch the games back, he wasn't the only like projected to be like top 5 receiver on his team. Jalen Waddle was there as well. Mm-hmm. Jalen Waddle got hurt. He was out. So you saw a split offense going from sharing it between the two guys to, hey, we're just going to throw to Devontae Smith every time and he's going to catch the ball because he's a good wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mac Jones wasn't a Heisman candidate.
No.
He's good.
But it's, again, I mean, you look at the quarterback situation, and it was similar to what Ohio State has with Kyle McCord. Like, you have a quarterback that's not really that tested, doesn't have that much experience. He's winning games, but is he really that good of a quarterback? Lots of questions around him. We probably didn't feel it as much here in Columbus because Alabama's a long ways away, but if you lived in Alabama at the time and now you live in Ohio, it's probably a very similar situation at quarterback. But again, the Waddle getting hurt. Emeka is out temporarily. He should be back this week. We're recording this right before the Wisconsin game. That game is tomorrow night. So, but yes, Ohio State obviously has lots of very good receivers. We have, I don't know, five stars in the roster.
The best
right
receiver
now.
room in the country, unquestionably.
Yeah, it's not debatable.
Yeah.
But the other thing to look at, like, on the other end of that, so we're looking at his stats. I have them written down. He has 766 yards in the year as of now, again, before the Wisconsin game. 6 touchdowns. He's averaging 18.2 yards per catch. His yardage is 8th in the country. His touchdowns is tied for 18th, but that's because there's a lot of guys in that, like, 6-7 range. If he had 8, I think he'd be top 4 or 5. So just 2 touchdowns away from being, in the top of that conversation. And then the yards per catch, he is tied for 5th among guys with 600 or more yards. So of the receivers that are targeted a lot, that have a lot of yards, he's 5th in that aspect. And a stat that I actually heard today, Marvin last year said that the big thing he wants to work on this year is yards after catch.
Yep.
He has more yards after catch so far this season than he has all of last year combined. So he's looking much better. Obviously, he's the son of a Hall of Famer. Like, he's going to be a good wide receiver, and he's got a couple extra inches on him. Yeah. It's the second coming of Marvin Harrison.
He's a freak.
But those stats are a little suspect. But you guys were talking about his bad games, Notre Dame and Indiana. Indiana was trying to bleed the clock out.
They also double covered him the entire game.
They did, and that's exactly what Notre Dame did as well. They sold out on Marvin Harrison Jr. They put 2 guys on him the entire game. That's why Emeka had a great game. Indiana, Marv also got hurt. He had the ankle injury in the 3rd
Notre Dame
quarter.
Was that
Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, he got hurt.
Both in the state of Indiana.
That is true. We play
3 games.
Well, if we go to the Big Ten Championship, we play 4 games in the state of Indiana this year.
I think he also had a touchdown that got called back against Indiana because he stepped out of bounds.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So, and that was wasn't it a long touchdown?
I think it was debatable. I think it was like a 20 or 30 yarder. I don't think it was like super.
I mean, that's another touchdown, another 30 yards.
Yeah. 766 to 800 ish.
Yeah.
Not that that's going to make a massive difference in the scheme of things. No, I think that Marv can be in the conversation if he's in between 13 to 1,500 yards and has 12 to 15 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think he puts him in the conversation.
We're recording this before the Wisconsin game. The next 4 games are a cakewalk. It's Wisconsin. I don't know the order of this. I'm just rattling the teams off. Wisconsin, Michigan State. Who else is in there? Is Rutgers in it?
Rutgers.
We have Michigan State.
Rutgers at home.
I'm missing one.
Michigan State, Wisconsin.
They should be 4 very easy teams to beat. Wisconsin is the scariest of them because the Luke Fickell connection, and Wisconsin is historically a good
team. Is it 4 games before Michigan or 3 games and then Michigan?
I think it's 4. I just can't remember the 4th one off the top of my head. Gage is looking it up as I'm talking. I'm stalling if you can't tell.
4 then Michigan. We go Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, Minnesota.
Okay, Minnesota.
Yes.
Minnesota.
Yes. So he could easily have. I mean,
well, let's
I don't think anyone would be surprised
project.
if he had 120, 130 yards per game. I don't think people would be that surprised if he had 200 a game in that stretch. I mean, it would be incredible and it would be higher than we expect, but I don't think it would be like a jaw-dropping. This is crazy. This never should have happened kind of thing.
I think Marv's biggest issue, besides his position and the precedent, is that he does play with other good players. Like Emeka Egbuka is also projected to be a first-round pick in the NFL.
Sure.
He's really good, and then Cade Stover is an elite
top three.
Elite
all
tight end.
three will be a day one pick.
Yes, elite tight end too. So it's just not that easy to just go, oh, he's automatically going to get every single target. Now, yes, he is the best player, and we'd like to throw him the ball every play. But in the games that Emeka plays, Emeka is going to get some looks too. Now, if he continues to be hurt, I mean, yes, those are the games where Marv's going to get 10 to 15 targets as he should. But there's going to be games where he's double teamed, and Kyle would just take on Emeka a game because. I mean, right, we're still trying to pile up wins here, but
I mean, on the topic of Cade and Emeka, like I saw this the other day. We're the only team with 3 players on the actual Heisman watch list, the official list that they release of like it's a lot of players. It's like
I think Cade's
40 or 50 guys.
Comparable receiving yards to Marvin. I think he's in the 500 to 700 range.
I'll look it up while you're making your point.
Real quick, I just wanted to project a little bit, and I feel like this is even a safe projection. If Marvin were to average 130 yards per game just through Michigan, not even the Big Ten championship game, we won't get into that whole conversation with the Heisman yet. Which is very possible considering he just had like 170 yards last week. Very possible, especially with our competition. He'd be at 1,416 yards, which would be I believe the best receiving season of an Ohio State wide receiver. I think Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson were all in like the 11, 12, 1,300 range. We'd have to look that up to fact check that, but it'd be one of the best receiving seasons from an Ohio State receiver in the recent memory, maybe all time. And then if he were to even just get 1 touchdown a game for the next 5 games, and then maybe he pops off and gets 2 in one of those games, he'd be at 12 touchdowns for the season. So that'd be 12 touchdowns and 1,400 yards in the regular season, which is a pretty fantastic regular season. So is it Heisman level?
So Cade Stover statistically is better in pretty much every area than Emeka at this point. So, receptions alone. Cade has 27, Emeka has 22. Marv has 42, for reference. Cade has 429 yards. Okay. Egbuka has 303. Marv has 766. Average per catch, we'll do Marv first because he's the highest. 18.2. Cade has almost 16, 15.9. And Emeka has 13.8. They're long. Marv has a 75-yarder. Cade has a 49-yarder. Emeka has a 28-yarder. And then touchdowns, Marv has 6, Cade has 3, Emeka has 3.
Okay.
So, very comparable again.
Yep.
I mean, similar. They're much closer than Marv is to them because Marv is, leagues ahead of everyone.
Yeah.
But very, very good receiving, weapon in the game. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it closes because there's 5 weeks left in the season, and there's not a clear winner at this point at all. A lot of these guys have huge games left. They're staged to go and win it. Will be there. It's going to be interesting to watch because like Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, like they have like a lot left. The Pac-12 is just silly this year. Bo Nix, only because he lost to Michael Penix, I think is a little bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to that. Even though statistically he's playing out of his mind this year.
He's the most efficient player in college football.
Completion percentage. It's down a little bit this week because of Oregon's week, but last week I think he was at like basically 80%. 80% of passes he completed, which is insane.
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean he's at 78.4, which is again almost 80%, but.
with good stat. I mean, he's 19-1 touchdown interception ratio and 2,089 yards on the season.
I mean, right now, he's got Utah left. He's got California, USC, Arizona State, and then Oregon State. So, I mean, he's got three ranked teams
and
left to play.
Arizona State's not a cakewalk either. They had USC on the ropes, right? Mm-hmm. They had a couple.
They've played a couple ranked teams tough, and that's not even counting the Pac-12 championship game, which we assume Oregon will probably have a rematch with Washington. At this point, that's what we
see. That's going to be interesting. And then I talked about Bo Nix's schedule. Michael Penix Jr. goes. Now he has a little bit more room of error because he hasn't lost a game yet, but he goes Stanford, USC, Utah, and Oregon State, and then Washington State. So he's got 3 ranked teams as well to play in the next 5 weeks. So these guys have some room to really take off and make their Heisman case. But also with that, like we've talked about this off air a few times. The Heisman is like also not a team award, but it's your team has to be really good to be in it.
To be the Heisman.
To be the Heisman. I think
RG3 might be the only real exception to. I think they were like a 2-loss Baylor team when he won it.
Lamar was a 3-loss team.
Yeah, there's been a few exceptions in the last
RG3 was close, though.
in the last 9 years. So since the playoffs started. So recent history here. 7 of the 9 Heisman Trophy winners have played in the playoff that year they won. 8 of those 9 were in like what I call playoff contention. So going into championship week, like conference championship week, they were like in the playoff mix. So
Lamar would be the only one, right?
Yes, Lamar is the one exception.
And they were in contention until they lost to Clemson late in the season. Well, it was before
I think their second loss. Their second or third loss I think happened like in the middle of the season. But I think his stats statistically were just so silly. He had like
it was pretty easy.
He carried the team.
He had 3,500 yards passing and 1,500 yards rushing.
It was like high school statistics.
Yeah,
like
it was absolutely silly.
And he was like he had like 15 rushing touchdowns, like 25.
And then Caleb Williams is a good example. Last year, USC was ranked 4th going into the Pac-12 championship game. If they had won that, they presumably would have been in the playoff. So you have to be in playoff contention or be Lamar Jackson, essentially, to win the Heisman. Maybe not to be invited or whatnot, but to win it. So, I mean, honestly, out of Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, like one of them are going to play themselves out of it, probably by losing. Honestly,
right. I think most of them, outside of Marv, I think most of the ones that we've talked about control their own fate. Jaden Daniels, I don't know because they're a 2-loss team, but statistically, he's on par with Michael Penix in yards. He has 5 more touchdowns, 2 less interceptions. Completion percentage is better. They're throwing the ball less, and he still has those statistics. So I think he's the only one that might be an exception outside of Marv.
His case is going to be interesting because he's still on this list, and LSU has 2 losses.
I mean, they could beat Bama and make the SEC championship
if
game,
they beat
hypothetically.
Bama.
No, yes. I think their playoff aspirations have gone, I think.
What do you do with a 2-loss LSU that goes to the SEC title game and beats Georgia?
Neither of them go. No SEC teams go that.
That would be crazy. Like you put Georgia in over the team that just beat them
the week before.
I mean,
as a 1-loss Georgia.
I think you have to put both in at that point. But that's assuming that there's not an undefeated Pac-12 champion, an undefeated Big Ten champion, a maybe 1-loss Big Ten loser in like Ohio State or Michigan that doesn't make the championship game. Like that's a tough decision.
I feel like Alabama's stiffening up a little bit. They still don't look great, but it feels like they're just going to find ways to tough it out and beat teams.
Their defense is still good. They have inconsistency at quarterback, but the defense is still Alabama. So
right.
We'll see. I think we've seen a not in the conference championship version of it, but I'm always how many losses you have has to matter. I mean, what was it? Was it 17? 17? I think it was 17. The year we lost to Penn State.
I think we lost and then we won the 2 thrillers in a row after we lost.
Yeah, so I think
it's either 16 and then won 17-18 or it was 17 we won 18-19.
Was it JT? Because JT was 16 was his last year, right?
No.
think 17 was his last season, and then Haskins had the KJ Hill touchdown on the sideline to win after the Benjamin Victor crazy semantics that he pulled off.
I think it was 16. Regardless, the year that Penn State beat Ohio State, the blocked kick that one. We went 11-1. They went 10-2, and they won the Big Ten championship. But we went to the playoff.
And we got waxed by Clemson.
Yes.
31.
But we made the playoff over 2-loss conference champion Penn State, who beat us.
That's a good example.
I think it's how you lose too. Because if it's like hey, this is a game into the last like 30 seconds of the game, and it's competitive, and it could go either way. Like on a neutral field, maybe they both win 5 times out of 10. I think then yes, you go by record. But I think if LSU beat Georgia by like 14, 17, 21, like a decent amount of points. I don't know.
It would honestly have to be like Ohio State, Wisconsin fashion. Like Ohio State won 53-0. It would have to be like 30 to 40 point margin where you're like, oh my gosh, LSU is significantly better than Georgia. There's no way that we can now pick Georgia over them. If it's close, I agree with you, Gage. I think you have to take Georgia in that scenario.
Now, unfortunately, I do hate to be this guy. I don't always agree, but I feel like I have to just state what will happen in this case.
Florida's going to be Georgia tomorrow.
I'm fine with that. I'm here for it, Nate. If Georgia lost to LSU in the conference championship, and that was in this case, let's pretend that Georgia beats Florida tomorrow for just giggles. Okay, let's pretend that happens. Even though I think we think Georgia's resume is very thin, I think the reality of the situation is the committee and the AP poll and all that stuff, they will fluff up the rest of the SEC enough to where Georgia's resume is whatever enough to get into the playoff.
They should have 4 ranked. Assuming they win out until that game, they should have 4 ranked wins. Because they beat Kentucky by a significant margin. And then to end the season, obviously we have Florida this week. The week after is Missouri, who's 16 right now. Ole Miss is 12 right now. Tennessee is 21 right now. And then they finish the season with Georgia Tech.
But how I always look at it is I hear you. I just don't usually agree with they beat this team when they were ranked, and now they're not. Like Kentucky is a good example.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Kentucky's a fake good team this year.
Well, Kentucky. The problem with Kentucky was that game for Georgia was, oh look, Georgia's back. Look at how much they beat Kentucky by. Then the next week, Missouri walks Kentucky too.
Kentucky was fluffed up because they had just beaten Florida, like handedly.
Well, I'm a Florida fan. Florida's not good.
Right, but they were still at that point in the season, like what was this, 4 weeks ago?
Kentucky's schedule before Florida. Vandy, who is a terrible football team most of the time. I haven't seen them this year. Akron, East Kentucky, Ball State.
Yeah. See that, but that's the problem.
None of those are like below. Oh wow, Akron was 35-3,
the SEC
but it wasn't really
inflated every year, no matter what their schedule is, and nobody else gets that same benefit of the doubt. Only the SEC, and so that's where you get like, oh, Georgia has 4 ranked wins. Well, am I going to take Georgia's 4 ranked wins, or let's just say Ohio State beats team up north and they have 3 ranked wins, which are all over top 10 teams at the time? You're like, oh my gosh, it's such a better resume.
Yeah, we'd have 3 top 10. I feel like there's another one that was ranked at the time.
Well, the thing is, Maryland was undefeated and they were 26th.
Yeah, they were ranked at 1 point.
They could finish the season ranked, which would
Maryland's
be fantastic.
A good football team. They're underrated.
So too.
They should be. If I was just ranking teams based off power, they would be top 25. Well, yeah, our power rankings are. Are you trying to tell me to pull them up?
Well, we can definitely do that. Which, plug real quick, we've been releasing power rankings on Mondays via our Twitter account. So Nate mentioned it at the beginning of the show as we're kind of wrapping up here too. We've got those power rankings. So if you are not following our Twitter for any other reason, tell us what you think of our rankings. Tell us if they suck. As if they do, maybe we'll try to do it a little bit differently. It is not like an AP poll. It is in the fact that we all rank and it's compiled together, but we try to view it as the college football playoff committee would view it. So we look a lot at resume. That's why we have Ohio State at 1. They've got the best resume in the country.
I use FPI to make mine. I don't know what you got, but like
I took FPI
sure
highly into consideration. Yeah.
FPI and other power rankings. Like
yeah, I eyeball it. I eyeball it. Just go. All right. Who's lost to who?
Let's just guess.
Let's just who's looks good.
We're not professionals.
Margin of victory. All that good stuff. But the SEC's overrated. Sorry, I was looking at all their schedules, but
that is a good place to end it, though. I think the SEC is overrated. If you take nothing else from this,
the SEC is overrated, guys. Definitely, this year they definitely are. I mean, I think that's pretty much fact. So
I almost want to just put it out there, an SEC team will not win the Natty this year. I will make my bold prediction.
I think that's fair.
I don't. It's not this year. Someone else is going to get one.
Not again.
Not again.
Well, thank you guys for listening in. Like we said a couple times, follow us on Twitter. That's where you can reach us the easiest at Official Cap City. That is our Twitter handle. Shoot us questions, interact with us, comment on our post. We will reply. We'll do our best. But thank you guys for listening in, and that is going to end it for us.